Thank you, Leslie. Yes, we do have the problem that Dan was talking about. We have to protect our systems from, especially when they become all electronic, from Mr. Wing in Shenzhen taking a cool billion or two before breakfast. But actually, one of the major risks we have to worry about is that small cheating, that small fraud which people drift into, and that is one of the main initiatives and concerns that we have in the system. We're working very closely with HMRC and DWP to try and get an effective system at a lot of levels. And the reason we're concentrating so hard on issues around fraud and errors is because the figures that we're dealing with are really large. The total that we look at, we actually monitor the figures very closely. We're running at about over 5 billion every year, and that is 3% of the welfare budget. And when you look at the sums, I mean, it's always fun to look at figures. 100 million every week, I think, 14 million every day. Half a million, more than 500,000 every hour. You know, it's a lot of money. It's simply unaffordable, and it's not. It's simply not fair, because who's paying for it? It's the people, paying their taxes, and they're carrying. Each of them is carrying £450 every year to deal with a total debt issue in the public sector. A total fraud, error, and debt, which is costing 29 billion a year. So it's a crime. We can't afford it. We have to do everything we can to stop it. And the ways that we need to do that, the first thing clearly we need to do is to stop it happening in the first place. And that actually, to my mind anyway, is probably the most important thing we can do, is to try and stop it happening to start with. If we can do as much of that as possible, all the techniques that we need to detect people and take them to justice become less important, because they are very, very expensive. What are the measures that we've done? This is between DWP and HMRC. We have announced a set of measures to cut the figure by a quarter, 1.4 billion a year, by March 2015. And we're doing that through 5 key principles. The first one is the prevention, which I was talking about. The next one is detection, which makes people feel that if you are going to cheat, we're pretty likely to catch you. Correction, sort out where people have taken money, get it back from them, punish them. So we're strengthening the sanctions for when people are caught, and deter people, make people feel that these punishments actually are quite harsh, and I don't want to be on the receiving end of them. Let me just take you through the work that we've been doing. We launched last year what we're calling the Mobile Regional Task Force, and that's a way, Dan will be amused, that was an idea that I can attribute entirely to my cousin George Lowenstein, whom he quoted, another behavioral economist. He said, the thing that he went to Glasgow when he was a student in his postgrad, and the thing that terrified him more than anything else was the license vans coming round to find out why he hadn't paid his TV license. So that concept, which clearly resonated with him, we've picked up and taken into the fraud and error work. So we're just going to an area and checking everyone in that area for their welfare, for their benefits, and for their tax credits. And we've so far been to Birmingham, Croydon, Cardiff, and in Cardiff, for example, we look through, I think it's more than 18,000 separate claims, and it does really have an impact on detection and deterrence. What we're doing now is finding out what is most effective and what is the mix of publicity, and we haven't worked out how to get the vans with the circling license detector, the television detector, but that's the kind of impact that we're trying to find out. We're having partnerships with the private sector to identify that fraud, and one of the things that we're doing, we have a contract, for instance, with Experian, whom I'm seeing on the platform beside me. They supply us with credit reference data to help us track benefit payments. And the way that we're running that particular contract is that it's entirely driven by the results that Experian actually get. They've generated, that detection has generated savings so far of over £17 million, and we're expecting to save £60 million by March. Now, I've been a great proponent of payment by results, which we're doing, as all of you I'm sure will know, in the work program, which is the single biggest payment by results program of any company, any government in the world. And I believe that this has the most enormous potential for government contracting right the way across a range of services, drives performance, better deal for taxpayers, and we're committed to expanding it as a government, and clearly fraud detection is absolutely one of the ways that we can do that most effectively. However, looking at payment by results, and clearly we're learning all the time, competition in payment by results really does help. And a government has got to be able to choose the most effective services and keep people competing while they're carrying out those particular tasks. And so I guess this is a message to some of the people in the audience today that we will be looking at this pretty hard. There will be opportunities here for private firms in this area right across the piece, so keep yourselves well tuned. We're much better now, if I move on a bit, in our ability to detect fraud and error. We've got teams working through cases. In DWP, for instance, we've cleansed a huge number of particular claimants ahead of the introduction of welfare reform. We've saved, just on that exercise, £413 million so far. We're better at sharing data. One of the examples of that is we have a system where we provide data to local authorities. It's called Automated Transfer to Local Authority Systems, Atlas, snappy. And that automatically informs local authorities of the changes in benefits or tax credits, and that's beginning to, it's quite a new system, starting to save money, 11 million so far. Assessing risk, we've improved that. We've got a system for that. That's got another snappy title, FEAST, which stands for slightly more prosaically Fraud and Error Assessment System Tool. But don't blame me, I didn't make that one up. But that identifies fraud and error in the tax credit system, and that's been saving money. That's saved 50 million so far. And joint operations is another thing that we've learned is really effective, and clearly the relationship between DWP and HMRC in this area, actually, as in quite a lot of areas nowadays, is moving closer and closer and more effective. We've secured with HMRC 44 convictions, and that led to more than £1 million back just for the DWP side, and a similar amount of savings in tax credits. One of the things that is emerging now is that the detection work that we're doing in the area of benefits and tax credits is beginning to see some spillovers more generally, and we're finding that we can use detection of benefit fraud as a way of catching dangerous criminals, and we're beginning to look at this as the Al Capone strategy. And the Al Capone, as you all know, I'm sure, Al Capone was not caught because he was a smuggler, and he wasn't caught because he was a bootlegger, and he wasn't even caught for murdering lots of people. He was caught for tax evasion. And that is exactly what we're looking for here. We're beginning to catch quite dangerous people because they're trying to fiddle the benefit system. And we're linking with agencies, criminal agencies, right across the piece, both in this country and more generally and abroad. And we are aiming to find the felons and strip them of their assets. So the Fraud Investigation Service investigators have close working ties with the police, with SOCA and other law enforcement government departments. A good example of what I'm talking about is a Lithuanian national, Stasys Baranauskas, in the northwest, and that began with a really quite low-level referral to the National Identity Fraud Unit. He applied, in fact, for a national insurance number, and he claimed his name was Andreas Maximaitis. Excuse me, I just have to read that rather carefully to get the pronunciation right. But when we looked rather more carefully at his ID application, his ID card, there were some anomalies, and he was visited by our investigators and the police at his address. He was arrested, and then he was fingerprinted, and he emerged to the police under his real identity, Stasys Baranauskas. A magistrate's warrant followed. Well, it was found that he was wanted actually on a magistrate's warrant for failing to appear in court in connection with a serious assault in 2006. He was wanted as well by the police in Northern Ireland on a charge of rape, and he was charged with offences under the Identity Documents Act 2010, sent to prison for 16 months, and is then about to be interviewed in connection with rape and attempted murder. So, why I think this is valuable, as we get to grips with fraud, as we get to the message out, the fact that it is our operation finding these dangerous people is beginning to send a measure out to people who are not criminals in that extreme way, that actually they are taking quite a risk in cheating both on their benefit claims and on their tax credits. One of the most important initiatives that this government has is the introduction of the universal credit, which is a remaking of the welfare system, the whole way that benefits are delivered, calculated to people, to a large number of people, 18, 19 million people. And we're going to use people's real-time earnings to assess what they should be being paid. The use of that system, the new PAYE real-time system, will pick up financial irregularities. We're expecting to save considerable sums, 170 million a year, simply on that fact of the financial irregularities being picked up. We will reduce the sheer incentive for fraud clearly by that immediacy, but also the whole of the way that universal credit works is by allowing people to keep more of their earnings when they do small amounts of regular work, the kind of work that normally you'd take the wedge of notes and put in your back pocket and not mention to anyone. But one of the things that we're able to do with the universal credit, which is going to be a mainly digital service, is we're going to be able to fine-tune very precisely the presentation and the structure in a way that minimizes people's incentive to cheat. I mean, things that Dan was just talking about a few minutes ago, how you present, ask people, to update the fact, give us another reassurance that this is your claim. So an active lie is so much harder to do than a drifting allow a situation to go on, which is what's happening at the moment. So but we can experiment. We've got in the legislation a clause which allows us to trial with controls every aspect of the universal credit, from presentation to the shape of the tapers, to the associated conditionality. So we can play around and create a social laboratory, the like of which does not exist, I don't think, anywhere in the world. And I am hopeful that behavioral economists will be coming over to try out all these different theories and approaches, because they will have a way to test it. And clearly I'm working with David over here, David Halpern, to make sure that we take every advantage of that opportunity. So just on the fraud, just back to the figures, just introducing this new system we think will save us $1 billion, more than $1 billion a year. We have an ambitious program beyond that. We're going to introduce a single fraud investigation service, and that means that there'll be flexibility for the DWP and the local authorities to share resources, agree priorities, bring together all of the formidable fraud-busting technology that we do have into one place. And then on top of that, when we have tougher new levels of sanctions, you start ramping up the deterrence effect and start making people who are fundamentally law-abiding just think it's just not worth going down any particular path. Among the punishments for the serious crime, and the kind of Lithuanian example I had, an immediate 3-year loss of benefits for that and for identity fraud, and then administrative penalties of £350 in cases of fraud up to £2,000. We're developing a sophisticated new computerized approach called another fantastic, it's called IRIS, this one, and that stands for Integrated Risk and Intelligence Service. There's been a lot of imagination shown around these names. And what that is a hub for taking the data in and assessing it and analyzing it. And it will incorporate risk profiling and data matching with real-time information from a wide range of sources. And that means that we'll be able to risk assess claims before we pay out. And then we can identify the people that we need to check more thoroughly, and we can identify unreported changes in circumstances. And clearly, the other thing we can do with that is maximize our debt recovery. We are working closely with HMRC right now to improve our debt recovery rates. We are confiscating assets, docking money from benefits, until people pay back the money that is owed to government. So far, in the last financial year, DWP recovered $322 million taxpayers' money through that team, through the dedicated debt management team. But we know there's a lot further to go there. We have an outstanding debt of $3.4 million. We've done a recent trial with credit rating agencies to help us to recover more debt, and we're increasing our use of private partners to chase that debt using court-authorized processes for greater use of asset seizure and using the proceeds of Crime Act to recover debts. This is all a massive agenda. It's an absolutely central agenda for us, DWP and HMRC. We are doing it at several different levels, structurally, psychologically, and organizationally, and we are determined to go much, much further than we have up to now. Thank you very much, everyone. Leslie.